There we go. And so feel free to pop in the chat with where you are coming in from. Feel free to add any questions you may have to the Q&A section. I will watch the chat as well, but the Q&A spot is a nice spot to put questions because then we can see them all. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jamie here in a second to present, and we will have time for questions at the end. So feel free to drop in questions as we go if they come up, and they may get answered as they go along, or we'll also have time at the end. And then feel free to message me if you need anything in the meantime, but glad you're all here. And thank you so much, Jamie, for being here. We really appreciate it. And I'll kick it over to you to start us off.
No worries. Thanks everyone for coming. I will save my intro for the end. I think at that point it's a little more meaningful, and frankly, those that are watching the recorded content would rather that I get into the content faster than later. So just because I always do an outline, it's what we do. We do presentations. This is basically what we're going to look at, understanding who they are, how to engage them, and how to manage them. So jumping right ahead, here we go. All right, so co-mans, definition is contract manufacturer. You also hear the term co-packer tossed around. That's a contract packager. They are technically different things, and the food industry does not care. We use them synonymously. Depends on what part of the country you're from and where you learn the food industry as to which one you tend to use. I use co-man. I'm going to use co-man throughout. I mean a contract manufacturer. In most cases, a contract packager would be commonly referred to in my part of the world where I was a repacker, where you take a finished product that's already in primary packaging and you pack it into another format, usually for end of aisle displays and things like that. But anyway, so getting into contract manufacturers, they are those with equipment, certifications, and the know-how to make certain types of products. The know-how is key here because many cases people want to lock co-mans from doing other types of products that are similar to theirs, except they're the ones that know how to make it, and they're already making other products. That's why you're working with them. So you're not going to lock them out of doing their other business. So, but we'll get into all of that in a minute. Capabilities, capacity, they're all going to vary from co-man to co-man. So one will have an MOQ, which I'll define in a moment, of let's say 10,000 units. Others will have 100 pounds. Others will have 1 million minimum. So, you know, it all depends on who you're talking to, what size equipment they have. We'll discuss why their MOQs or minimum order quantities are so large. Speaking of minimum order quantities, they're usually the amount that the co-man has to make in order to break even. That's because they have existing products. They know how much it takes to make a product. To that end, when they are, let's say, filling up a mixing kettle. When you have a mixing kettle, you have an impeller that drops down into it and it spins around. If you have a minimum order that is below where that mixing kettle's impeller is, you can't actually physically mix the product, which is why they have minimum order quantities. It's the minimum that is actually necessary. Now, why is 10,000 a number as opposed to 9,500? It's because it's round, and they like round numbers because they're easy to remember for the sales guys. But the you know, there are other reasons why you can have other MOQs. For example, if you've got a really long run of pipe, you have a certain amount that's going to be lost in the length of pipe from where it's mixed to where it's filled. There's also labor costs that, you know, they're generally going to pay their labor in shift long increments. So you're going to be paying for that. They may have their own internal metric that says, hey, no one's going to pay $100 a unit, so make a minimum order quantity to be such that it makes sense to actually bring on an entire shift of labor. So this presentation was originally designed for folks that are really just getting started. So in here is the kind of rolling way in which the co-mans do business, from forecast to PO, which is a purchase order, to actual production. Then they invoice based on what was actually produced. Sometimes they invoice before production, but that's a discussion. Then you pay on the invoice, and then they ship. Typically, sometimes they ship before you pay. Again, It's all about how you set up that relationship. Because they are physical plants, they are certified by the appropriate bodies, and that's what you want them to do. So if they are primarily not meat-based, they will not be certified by the USDA. If they are meat-based and almost everything that they do is meat, it may only be a USDA facility. There are facilities that are regulated by both, depending on what they run. Not every facility can run an organic product. Organic is certified not just from the ingredient side, but certified by the equipment as well, the operational procedures by which the co-man operates. So sometimes a group that doesn't do organic may never do organic because it's not in their best interest to do so, especially for a new brand. Gluten-free is an entire headache. For example, you can't have folks at lunchtime eating a sandwich that is made with gluten bread, even though they're in a break room. Some people will argue that point with me, but in effect, that is what it comes down to. That's the level of observability of their gluten contaminants that they have to go through. So if they are not currently gluten-free, you're unlikely to convince anybody to go gluten-free. So you got to look for a co-man that already meets your requirements. SQF, BRC, and to a European extent, ISO, they're almost all interchangeable as far as third-party audits go. So if somebody says, oh, we have to be third-party audited like SQF, but a co-man says, well, we're BRC audited, that's fine. 9 times out of 10, well, 99 times out of 100, no one cares. It's just a matter of having a third-party audit actually been done by a certified body that everyone recognizes. So that's basically the 3 primary ones. You only see SQF and BRC here in the US for the most part. Another thing about co-mans, they're not interested in the intellectual property of your product, primarily because they're making a whole bunch of other products. If they got interested in your intellectual property, they would not be in business for very long. So they are, you should always retain control of your product IP. If anyone ever says, hey, we're going to control your formula after this, that is a big red flag. Don't do that. We don't do that in the food industry for the most part. In the US, in the EU, different story. Intellectual property of how it's made, typically that's going to be the co-man's domain because that's literally what you're paying them to do. So, how your product gets put together, you may think is a function of, the order of operations or something like that, that's your intellectual property. In reality, it's a function of the equipment being used to put it together, which is their asset, and typically their intellectual property. So as far as where the typical lines are drawn, that is where the lines are drawn. And yes, we're still just getting into understanding co-mans. Co-mans, they generally make money based on how much product they produce. So their business model this is where we start to diverge how co-mans and brands necessarily have different business models. They are in the business of producing product in vast quantities, ideally, at a reasonable cost, and then move on to the next one. They don't want to develop your product. They don't want to make unsafe or unsellable product. They don't want to make product and then sit on it and hold it while you sell through it. They want to make it, ship it, get paid, move on to the next thing. They naturally want to make the product to your specification because, again, they want to get paid. If they don't make it to your specification, don't pay them. That's what it comes down to, make them remake it. That's a very common thing to have happen, and it happens a lot. Even in good relationships, it does still happen. So, never feel like your co-man can lord it over you or anything like that, and force you to accept unsellable product. Partnering with co-mans and supporting their efforts to streamline the product, meaning make the product more efficient so that they can be done with your product and move on to the next one. That is how you build a good relationship, where you acknowledge that their business is not trying to brand and market and sell a product. Theirs is to produce to specification so that they can sell it to you. 2 different pieces, that neither one of you can survive without the other. But this is how you reach across the aisle here and help them out. We'll get into more of that in a minute. But some people say, oh, I just work off my co-man. No, bad. Yes, you need it. Phys has a whole lot to that. Long and short of it is, well, proper, assessment of liability or allocation of liability across things, you get in big trouble pretty fast. There are no terms that are standard in the industry. There's no multiplier, there's no anything like that, because everybody builds their business model ever so slightly differently based on how they've been hurt in the past. I mean that the nicest way possible, but honestly, some of us emerging brands, we have bad stories about working with co-mans, and so co-mans will attempt to protect themselves in the next relationship by inserting more words into their contract. I call it scar tissue. It's evidence that they've worked with somebody, they've been hurt in the past, and now they've overcompensated. Their contract now looks ugly. There are certain things that should be in a contract. Highly recommend that you work with somebody like Lauren Handel with those contracts whenever that comes up, to make sure that all of the elements are in there. You want to make sure that you've got things set up, because you will exit your co-man one day. That is almost guaranteed, especially if it's your first co-man. You will never be in your first co-man for more than 5 years. 99.5% of the time. Something will go wrong, or even better, something will go right, and you outgrow them and they'll support you moving on to the next place, which is great. When you are starting to work with them, the low MOQs, like hitting the MOQ, meaning the minimum amount, is likely to generate a negative margin for you. That's known and understood. That is not an indication of what it's like working with them going forward. You need to make sure that there's a path to growth here. And I'll show you in just a minute how to actually make sure that that's the case. I'm not doing a bait and switch. I promise this content is actually in this presentation. But let's talk about how we actually engage them. So first, when do you need a co-man? Well, now that we know what co-mans are, what they're good for, you want to look at co-mans when you are looking at a sales volume that is beyond your production capacity, but you want to look at that in the future. So what I mean by that is you need to be looking at where you are going to be in the future to know when you're going to outgrow your production capacity. You probably want to start looking for a new co-man about a year before then. I say a year, not because it takes a year to get a co-man on board, but because your projections might be wrong and you might be more successful than you expected. And I'd rather you be set up for success, because it's going to take you at least 6 months to get that co-man on board if you start searching today. That's just a reality, and I'd rather you be prepared and have 2 production sites and not be behind the 8 ball on a timeline. For those of you that are working by yourself, you're manufacturing, you're sourcing ingredients, you're doing all the shipping and everything like that, realistically, the maximum amount of production days you can put forth in a month is about 5. And by that, I mean 5 good, like 8 to 12 hour shifts worth of production is realistically your ceiling. So when you're looking at what your production capacity is, look at how much you make in that amount of time, and then realize that that's going to be your ceiling, because you have all the sourcing, all the marketing, all of the sales, all of the execution, not to mention, feeding your cat and seeing your family. All of those things are important. And you need to make sure that there's enough balance in there. So what I've found is most folks cap out about 5 production days. But that said, brands are, if you've got some existing sales, you're likely not too small for there not to be some sort of contract manufacturing solution for you out there. What I mean by that is there are groups that work with really, really small folks who say they have no MOQ. There's no such thing as no MOQ. An MOQ is always 1, if nothing else. But if they've got any type of scalable equipment, each one of those is going to have a minimum operating volume, and that will be your MOQ. So, and there are groups out there that are just in place for you to do to grow from a commercial kitchen directly into their facility. Their facility is still relatively manual, but they've got some of the scalable equipment so you can learn about how your product's going to scale before you go to a larger contract manufacturer that might have a 10,000 unit minimum. These groups do exist. They can be a little difficult to get into, obviously, with their popularity. But if you're not aware of them, give us a call. We've got a list somewhere. That's the whole point, is we've got resources. We need to figure out how to use them to scale everybody's brands. All right. To be honest, there's actually no list of commands that is any good in general. That's not a dig on anybody's list. It's just that by definition, the websites and databases that are out there are almost always opt-in. There is no way to search for a command that will grab every command that's out there. In fact, we have to estimate at how many commands. I was talking to somebody today who said that he thought there were between 3,000 and 5,000. I know there's more than 3,000. I'd say about half of them don't have a website, and probably a good 20% of them don't believe in email. I don't know why. I can't explain it to you, but we all know those people in our lives who use a personal AOL.com email address for professional work. They have phone numbers. Sometimes it's Jimmy's cell phone, and Jimmy's a very nice guy, but he works third shift and he doesn't take your phone call on first shift. Don't ask me. But a lot of them here that do have websites, they'll hear from anywhere from 3 to, I heard 20 recently, startups per week. So the goal in trying to engage these folks until we get a better solution out there is to be concise, meaning you're going to present kind of what your project is in the same way you're doing an elevator pitch for a investor. And if they say, well, that's not really my interest, great, thank you very much. Do you know anyone else who might be interested? If not, thanks very much. Have a good day. Move on, because you're not going to get anywhere trying to badger somebody to run your product. I would say in general, and I hate to say this, but about 85% of successful projects with commands start with a reference from somebody who already knows the command. That bodes really well for consultants. That doesn't bode well for those trying to find a command on their own. People do it. They do it successfully, but it can be challenging. So don't give up hope if you have to call 80 different places. Those of us that do this for a living, we call 80 on every single command search we do. And it's not even a list. We go find the list every time. The most important thing I can say for most people that are trying to find their first command, don't worry about geography. It really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Oh, but shipping charges. I understand. The shipping charges are relatively inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. By the time you get a volume that matters, the costs of picking, the in and out charges, the labor costs, where you're sourcing your ingredients from and shipping into and things like that, all of that's going to matter a whole lot more than where your command is located and how you get them to your product into the hands of consumers, or I should say customers and then consumers. Good partners will pay for themselves over and above the fuel cost, well in excess of anybody trying to find something in Kansas City, the geographic median or whatever of the US. So please make sure that you're willing to look outside of your local area for a command. It makes it near impossible to find what you're looking for. Also, when you get turned down from a command, ask that command if they know of anyone else who might be interested. Commonly, the people who don't have email are known by the other groups in the area, and they're like, oh yeah, Bruce, yeah, we'll just pass it off to we're not the right group, but Bruce down the street, well, he does a lot smaller volumes and he's got a doolywig that can do this in no time, and he's a great partner. Cool, great. He's not going to be Shopify integrated. I'm just going to tell you. So So there's some other things to kind of worry about as you go downstream there. But that's why we have other partners in the startup CPG ecosphere. All right, how to talk to a co-man. As I mentioned, be concise. You want to basically, like, here's your script. If you want a script for calling a co-man blind and cold, tell them what it is that you are making. I'm making potato chips. I need help manufacturing it. My preliminary formulation is complete, and it better be complete. My process specifications are more or less developed. I just need to know what scale we're talking at. And my packaging's defined. I know my volume targets for today of what I want to do for an MOQ. What I want to do for an MOQ, not what I will actually do. You probably have to end up going 10x that, but is what it is. But more importantly, I know what my volume targets are going to be in 2 years. That is where the relationship pays off. That is the inflection point where the co-man is now making money more, in excess of anything that they've invested. So they're looking for a relationship that's going to last at least 2 years, maybe 3, maybe 4. For a first co-man, 4 is kind of out the window. It's going to be 2 or 3 years. But after that, it's just gravy at that point. And then if you've got desired certifications like organic or gluten-free, state that. Like, literally, this is your opening intro. If, at that point, pause, because they're going to say, no, we don't do that, or no, we're not organic, or, whatever the case may be, but give them the opportunity to exit the conversation right there. Because if you let them have that opportunity, you can ask them the follow-up question of, do you know anyone in the area that does this? Even better, right? The other thing is, you will be asked questions immediately following this, things that they have that are basically scar tissue that will tell you how they've been burned in the past. They're going to ask you, are you on the market? If you're not on the market, don't say you're on the market. Say, hey, we're making this out of a commercial kitchen right now. We're looking for our first contract manufacturing partner. We're hoping that you might be it. Great. What kind of consumer are you looking to target to? This is important because they want to make sure that you have a little bit of understanding of what it is to actually target a consumer, channel strategy, things like that. This is just cursory type of information. Notice you're not inside of an NDA, so it's a 1-sentence answer, and it's not just yes. How much are you willing to run at a time? This is your opening salvo. I'd love to be able to get down to, 5,000 pounds or something like that at a production run. If they say, oh, our minimum is 10,000, great. 10,000 is going to be just fine. I just wanted to, manage my expectations. And what's your shelf life? In the case of shelf life, you can say, well, we have good indicating data that it should be 12 months. Never say, I hope it'll be 12 months. That's not going to get you anywhere. That means I don't know. But if you have some initial data which says I put it on the shelf for a month and it lasted and it didn't seem like it was degrading, I have initial data that says it'll be somewhere around 12 months, but we're still waiting on data to come back. Great. It's not telling them a lie. It's just telling them you're still working on it and that you know what you're doing. And always try to listen more than you talk. You may get when you're talking to a co-man, you may get an educator who is somebody who wants to share with you all the things that you don't know, so that they know what it is that they're talking about, or it's just their personality or whatever, because you're talking to a sales guy. You're not talking to the production folks. You're not talking to plant management. This is just who this person is. I use the word guy because probably 90% of the people you're going to be talking to with the co-man at this level are going to be guys. We can go on a whole diatribe about that, but I'm being recorded, and so I'm not going to. All right.
Quick
yeah.
question, Jamie.
Yeah.
Is this a good place to also mention any kind of like wins that you have as qualifier of like raised funding or got into Whole Foods?
No, only if they ask.
Okay.
Because what they're doing is the initial vetting. If they ask, hey, are you distributed anywhere? Yes, we're in Whole Foods. That's, are you backed by anyone? You will get that question about 10% of the time. Are you backed financially? Yes, we've received a total of X amount of funding so far. We're looking to do another raise to cover this, but we're trying to find our partners now so that we can demonstrate to our investors that we are going to be successful long term. You know, those are the types of things that if they come up, be prepared, answer. It's just like pitching to an investor because you're pitching to a partner, right? This is someone who's going to run your business with you. They just have a different focus, right? They're trying to make a bunch of product. So yeah, I would say doing the right now, trying to hit they care most, and you will have an opportunity to do that in the second contact, which is the next slide. The most tip and trick that I can give you right now for this is, as you're having this conversation, take notes. And after you're done with this conversation, send them those notes so that they have them to remember you by. Because again, they're getting anywhere from 5 to 20 calls a week. So if they have the notes, they don't have to remember your conversation, which is even better. But also send them in that email with the notes an NDA, because at this point, yeah, you've given them everything that you can tell them without an NDA. So that is the next step. After we've got the NDA, then we set up a second contact. Normally, they will bring a few more people into the loop. They will want to chat with you more about like what is your give us a little more example of your branding, what your product looks like. They're going to want pictures. They're going to want videos of your process if you can share that. If you have those, they're going to want to, ideally, if you can send product samples ahead of your second meeting so they're there, all the better. You get way further into the process, doing that. Once the NDA is signed, yes, you can share your formula. I know that is scary for a lot of folks, but do it. If you're really worried about it, strip out the detailed information about the ingredient suppliers. That makes it near impossible for them to duplicate what it is that you're working on. Listen. This is, again, a time to listen as they have expertise in their systems. There is a 7-year-old that is making his way into the room that I am in the middle of a presentation to a whole bunch of people across the country right now. Can I open this? All right, I'm going to open this and you're going to go back to what you were doing, okay? All right, say hi to everyone. Okay, now say bye. All right, well, that's now on video, perfect. Okay, so, you want to look for, as you're listening to kind of their expertise, they're trying to learn about your product so that they can start to build in their minds how they would produce it. They're literally in the second call trying to figure out which systems they're going to run it on, which production lines, how they're going to fit it into their existing schedule. They're already trying to build something for you. It doesn't seem that way, but that's exactly what they're doing because honestly, that's where their business is. And so they're trying to get to it as quickly as possible. As you go through this, there will be some follow-ups. You can also, at the end of this call, ask, what other things would be helpful in evaluating my product further for fit on your system? You're not assuming that they're already agreeing to do it. It's just that they're trying to figure out if they can. Put yourself in their position. Somebody calls you up, wants to run a product. Yes, I think I can, but I don't know your product. I don't know you. Let's talk about what that looks like and how we can make it work with the hammers and chisels and screwdrivers that we have on site. There will be discussion about a trial. It may not be in the second contact, it could be in the third or fourth, but at some point they'll want to run a trial, especially after they've seen a physical sample of your product. Some folks will do this for free. Some folks will do this for what it costs to do it. And some people make money doing this. I don't like the people who make money doing this, but it's their business model, so it makes their products cheaper down the line. Okay. But they're going to want documentation. Ask them for what documentation they want up front. Start to build a timeline. Figure out when you're going to have to order materials. Like there's a lot of work to be done around this so that you can make these trials successful. The trials may not actually produce any useful product. It may just be demonstrating that the things run through their system. those are not necessarily unsuccessful trials, even if they fail, because they may learn, hey, we've got XYZ thing that we need to upgrade the system. We've been looking at doing this for 10 years. Let's go ahead and do it now for this production line. We'll be ready in 3 months, right? But if you can attend the trials, that makes it actually faster, because then you can say, that looks like the right product coming out of that system, or it looks like the wrong product coming out of that system, or it tastes different, or it tastes weird. Can we look into that? The more you can kind of troubleshoot at the trials and meet the team and things like that, the further along you'll be to making product out of their facility.
Jamie, quick question on the attending the trials. We had a question from Erica. Does it make sense to visit prior to the trial as well before kind of going that far down the road, or is the trial usually the first time that you're going in person?
Pre-COVID, the second contact would in some cases be a site visit. Those are for folks that really want to move fast. Now it's about 50-50-ish, depending on who you're talking to. They may have a second contact, then a visit, then a trial. I like to try to smash the trial together into that if we can, because it's expensive to go out and visit. You know, it's all a question of what is the right pacing for you and what is the right pacing for your co-man. I think even if it's not the right pacing for you, offering up, combining things into a single trip to make it faster, to get to market, is a good thing, but always listen to, well, we're not really prepared for that yet. Okay, then 2 trips it is. That's fine. So they will appreciate that either way.
Cool, great.
When you go out for trials, so this is actually what the onboarding process looks like, by the way. When you go out for trials, because it's a trial, you'll be bringing in all the ingredients and packaging. You will have documentation that has to come along with those, including allergen statements, COAs, which are certificates of, of certificates of analysis. Everyone in the room was just yelling that at me on mute. Certification documents, ideally things like gluten-free and whatnot. The SDSs, that's the safety data sheets to make sure that the things are not going to explode. Yes, we all know sugar and flour explode. That's why sugar and flour plants keep blowing up and killing people in the US. Look it up. But those are why we actually look at the SDS sheets in the food industry. The idea is to consolidate all your all the materials. So you'll receive, let's say you're bringing only a 50-pound bag of sugar, 50-pound bag of flour, a 1-gallon tub of vanilla, and a 5-gallon tub of butter. I'm making cookies apparently. You can throw all those on a single pallet, stretch wrap it, and then have it LTL shipped over there. That's how they prefer to receive materials for trials. Same thing with packaging, right? If you can get it down to just a couple of pallets, so much easier for them to receive it than to receive 15 different shipments. Also, when you are done with the trial, all remaining raw materials from your trial and your finished goods can leave on pallets back to you. Now, you may just have a garage. Okay. My recommendation is to make friends with somebody with a warehouse so that you can receive the 50-pound bag to your house, walk it over to the warehouse that has the pallet handling systems like a forklift, stack it all up there, wrap it up. That way it can be your point of shipping out and your point of shipping back in, and then you can break down the pallets and take them back to your house if you want to. These are the duct tape ways of doing things. Ideally, you would have a warehouse in your facility if you have a facility, but not everyone does, and that's okay. You can still start a brand. All right. Trial expectations. Try to develop a trial plan, things that you would like to learn, or at least try to capture what it is that they would like to learn about your product so that you have it as a checklist of things to do on site. Failed product is expected. You will not make sellable product at a trial, probably 80% of the time. But more importantly, you want to ask about that when things fail, whether or not it's a major issue or a minor issue. Major issue means we probably can't run it or we need to buy new equipment. Minor issue is, yeah, we can probably figure it out on the fly and tweak it at the start of production type of thing. So you just want to kind of understand, because very different, very minor things can be completely unsolvable, and very major things can be really just an indicator of the system working just fine. And so what you want to do is understand that from the people who understand the equipment more than you. And so that's why you're going to the contract manufacturer, is to take to leverage their experience and expertise. And so best way to learn from a partner is to listen. I don't think any of you fail to listen. I think a lot of us have a lot of things to say and we don't always capture the right information. So we can ask and learn. It makes a good partner going forward. Expect inefficiencies. When you are changing things about how they do business, that will generate waste in their systems. So what I mean by that is, why is it taking us 2 hours to do a single weigh up? Is it impossible for you to run my product? Is it going to be? No, they couldn't find your ingredients, so they had to go back into the warehouse to find it. Once they found it, they brought it back out, but it took them half an hour to find it because they've got a huge warehouse. All of these things are dealable, you know, and adjustable, but that's not a major issue. Just ask, hey, is this going to be something that's recurring, or is this something that will be fixed in the future? It's not uncommon for a second or third trial to be necessary. Third trials, or anything beyond third trials, very unusual. You may have an extremely novel product for them, in which case you may want to ask, is there actually a pathway to success here? But a second trial, pretty common, probably about 30 to 40% of the time. A third trial is about 10% of the time. Anything beyond that is rare. Because if you can't learn it in 3 tries, it's a question of, can you learn it? All right. Let's see, there's a quick question here as I'm changing slides. What kind of must-have and nice-to-have regulatory documents should be required from the co-man? I'm not sure of what a nice-to-have regulatory document would be. There's only must-have, and the must-have is going to be generated based off of what you're saying on label. So if you are saying non-GMO project verified, well, you're going to have the project verified documents for each of the ingredients that you have, as well as organic and everything else. So you want to go through and make sure that you've got a regulatory expert telling you which documents are going to be needed, if you don't think that the co-man necessarily knows. So there are, to my knowledge, at least 17 different types of documents that you can have for any one ingredient. And so if you've got 17 ingredients, that's 189 documents you may have to hunt down, depending on the type of you know, claims and formula you generated. So the answer is a lot. And so if you feel like they're asking for something they shouldn't, you may want to ask them why they're asking for it. If that doesn't seem like the right fit for the relationship as it sits, ask a third party. Most of us in the food industry are willing to answer something like that for free. I had somebody ask me that about an hour and 43 minutes ago. So there was a discussion on the co-man understanding what allergens are in your product is important, but how does the potential client understand what allergens might be in the other products run on the same line? You ask them. You ask your co-man, are you running any other products with allergens? Yes. Do you swab for them to, at the clean out of every run? Their answer should be yes. And if they are swabbing, then there's no potential cross-contamination that you need to worry about, because if there is a cross-contamination and they're certifying your product is free from it, well, then your product is now outside of specification in case something comes up. Yes, there's a, yes, the allergen matrix is a good one. There's other discussions around, you know, risk factors and things like that, and taking tours of the facility. It gets into a larger discussion than where we're at in the co-man relationship at the moment. I would say, yeah, I would, if you've got specific allergen concerns and you feel like that they're not going to do a good job, one, maybe that's not the right co-man for you, but two, definitely reach out to an expert who can either tell you your fears are real or your fears are unnecessary in the space. Honestly, I think it's faster and easier than trying to research what an allergen matrix is and how to use it, things like that. My opinion, take it for what it's worth. All right, so let's say the trials go well. They're happy to run your product. Notice how I haven't mentioned costing yet, but we're starting to talk about the terms of the contract. We talk about the terms of the contract before we talk about costing. There's a reason for that I'll talk about. First, you want to get the template language, you want to review it, you want to send it all out what think that send it to an expert in this case. They're going to know what things in here are not common terms. So that way you've got, oh, internet connection is unstable. That's not good. Anyway, so you want to make sure that the expert reviews it. So that way it's got your call outs, the expert call outs, and then you send it back to the co-man. After the co-man agrees to the terms, and this can be a lot of back and forth, you'll end up with running it through a lawyer who's going to look at the language, and then there's final review by the brand and the co-man. I bring this up because I get this question asked a lot. How long does it take to review a contract? About a month. And that's under the best cases. So because contracts are long and they can be painful. And frankly, I'm not sure anybody except maybe the lawyer likes looking at them. So is what it is. The good thing about the expert is that they'll also explain anything that's not straightforward in the contract, answer questions, discuss negotiating strategy. They might talk about allergen concerns and assuage your fears there or not, etc. Like there's actually people who work in multiple areas. We're all people and have multiple facets. Costing comes after this because in the contract, you'll have terms like that you will receive my ingredients and then, hold on to them, give me inventory of them and tell me when we're going to run, or are you just going to ship them in ingredients the day of, and that will be how they receive things going forward. Very different level of staffing, so different costing. It's all about apples to oranges here and how different contracts and different proposals will be phrased differently. It's because all businesses are complex. These are the categories. If you want another quick cheat sheet, this is how you build a cost basis to see how a co-man is or should be costing out their bids to you. So how many people does it take to make it? What is the benefit rate? What do they get paid? Multiply that together for a shift. How much can you make in a shift is something we divide by at the end, but indirect labor, so management, QA, warehouse, maintenance, all those folks, the personnel for the maintenance here in this case. Utilities, you estimate this based off of the equipment specs that are running it. Maintenance costs, so fixing pumps and buying screws and things like that. It's generally 1% of the capital cost of the new system per month. And then you amortize that across 20 days in a month of production. You make sure that and that's how you assess maintenance for your particular production run. Facility, basically the easiest thing to do is do mortgage payments under an assumed percentage rate and things like that, divide by 20 based on the number of days of production in a given month. Gross profit, this is always a question. Co-man has to make money. If they're not going to make money, they're not going to do business with you. 8 to 25% is the going rate in general right now for gross profit, which means that they still have costs. Notice how I didn't say they were paying for the equipment anywhere in here. They're not paying for marketing anywhere. They're not doing anything about sales, startup support, or anything like that. All of those things come out of gross profit. So this actually goes a lot of different directions, but it's easier just to summarize at this point. The most common is between 12 and 16%. That is the most common. If you are going in with a low MOQ, you're going to be erring somewhere between that 16 to 25. If you are looking at where does the future take you, yes, you'll walk it all the way back down to 10, 11, 12%. It's just a question of where you're at today and where you're going to get to. but working with the co-man. So once you have a model, you can look at this and say, well, I can affect the direct labor by letting you guys use bigger equipment by ordering more. I can look at dividing all of these costs by a larger quantity of order so that, you know, the direct labor can make 5,000 units, or maybe they can make 50,000 units in the same amount of time. Great. Then you're dividing by a very different number and you can get a much lower cost of goods. Don't talk about costs at all until you've been through their facility, until you understand where they're coming from. This is a major, major thorn in a lot of people's sides, and it screws up a lot of relationships. Don't talk about costs, especially in the first call. Don't talk about it in the second call, unless they ask you where you want your price point to be. That comes up maybe 5% of the time. And you can always just say, you know, I'm kind of curious to see where we can get to. That's fine. But, you know, at the end of the day, you want to understand their business before you start trying to negotiate or dictate. I really hope you don't dictate costs, because frankly, they don't care what you can sell it for. They're selling it to you and they're making it to spec. So it's going to cost what it's going to cost, because this is their business model right here on this page. Ask co-mans where the future process improvements could be that will bring one of these or multiple of these elements down. It's not like you're going to change the facility costs. You're likely not going to change the maintenance costs. Utility costs could improve, but they're not a huge contributor. The indirect labor, maybe they're bringing another line on board. They can divide the overhead, which is what indirect labor is, across multiple production lines, which will bring your costs for indirect labor down. You know, these are all types of things where you can just kind of understand their business and get a better feeling for where they're coming from. I'm running late on time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize real quick. So for process improvements, co-man should invest. For equipment, don't buy equipment for your co-man. Short answer is you're a bank, they're taking a loan from you. Run it as a completely separate agreement. Do not put it on your manufacturing agreement. It is separate, and you do it completely off of that book, because it never works. This is the only way that I've ever seen it work because of maintenance costs. That's what it comes down to. Raw materials plus conversion costs equals your COGS FOB co-man by definition. So the conversion cost is what you're worried about with the co-man. Raw materials are what the raw materials are. I'm going to include these slides elsewhere so you can have a look at them about how to exit a co-man, how to manage a co-man. It's mostly about how you set up that contract and who's doing what. If you are in a relationship that's bad, read over this slide so you know who to talk to when and about what, and it will help you get out of where you're at right now. Shameless plug, read this when you get a chance. It's our website, kind of downloaded in a paragraph form. We help people out. Obviously, I know a little bit about what I'm talking about here. And if you've got any questions, give me a call. So yeah, more questions from folks.
Great. Yeah. Question from Courtney. Are there co-mans that can help you co-develop a product if you have an idea or an initial formulation, but not the final formulation? And do you recommend trying this approach versus developing your own formula first?
This is the European model. There are some folks that are doing that here. If you don't pay for the development at the time that it's being developed, then you end up paying them much more money to leave them because you don't own the formulation. So if they are helping to develop your formulation, they have rights to it. And so the question is did you negotiate up front that they don't own it? Otherwise, they probably own it by default, which means you can't ever leave that co-man and they can hold you hostage. It's a bad situation to be in. I highly recommend using a third party to develop, even though there are there are ways to have a co-man help you. Most of them won't do it because it's not their business model. So the good ones won't do it. So take that for what it's worth.
Okay. We had a question from Kylie about allergens. I know we talked a little bit about allergens. When a gluten-free product label says made in a facility that processes wheat, etc., does that mean that the co-man isn't swabbing the line, or is that like a just in case claim?
No, they are swabbing the line. What it means is that they are not going through the thorough inspection. So they are not GFCO certified. GFCO is the certifying body for gluten-free. If you want to pull that off your label, you have to get GFCO certified, and that can be a whole ordeal. Putting it on your label is what somebody somewhere told them that they need to do, because there is a risk, because they're not following all of the GFCO protocols.
Cool. And then we've got a question from Tara. Are there consultants that help find co-mans, and does the company pay for them or the brand?
The answer to the first question is yes. Check out our website. I'm going to do the shameless plug here. There are other groups that do it, including CPG Resources. There's also Whole Brain, Rodeo CPG. There's a lot of groups that find co-mans depending on how complicated the product is. Certain groups are better at more complicated things. Generally speaking, the company will pay the consultant. The brand will pay the consultant. The co-man will generally not pay the consultant. There are groups out there that will pay the consultant for landing brands at their facility, but they add to your ongoing costs. So what they don't tell you is they're adding anywhere from 1% to 5% to your every product that is manufactured there for the first 2 to 5 years. And so they are making not, $100 off of this, they're making thousands of dollars off of you by making your product more expensive. Highly recommend using somebody where you know where the cash is going, and it's very straightforward because it's one of those things. There are folks out there that'll help find co-mans for free. I don't know anyone that's doing it now, but I've known people who did it in the past. So just make sure that you know whether or not they're getting compensated by the co-mans they take you to, because that can be way more expensive. I've seen it be upwards of $20,000 that they made from finding one co-man, which just comes out of the brand's pocket, really, and that doesn't seem fair to me. So yeah, just to be one step further, our current cost of co-man searches is $3,000 for those who care. And there are people who will do it for cheaper if it's an easier search. So pretty good transparency. Building out a comprehensive co-man directory. There have been a lot of directories and databases that have been developed. I hope that you've got a strategy for keeping those up to date, because that is where a lot of things fall apart, is that co-mans really never update their information, ever. So I hope you've got that piece tackled. If you have, awesome. I will send everybody your way, because it sounds like a good solution.
And question, this is if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. But a question I was just thinking through is, do you recommend a strategy as far as, reaching out? Should you reach out to, if you've got some list or you're Googling, do you reach out to 5 at a time and then take your notes? How do you organize kind of the search process? Do you have any recommendations for structuring that?
Dozens at a time. So what you can find in probably an hour of Googling, like a solid hour of Googling, of folks that will meet your product requirements and things like that, you probably find 20 to 40 places. Call all of them, email all of them, do everything that you can to reach out to all of them, because you will find that maybe 20% will call you back. Right? So if you're calling 40 places, then you're only getting 8 of them to call you back, and maybe half of those are calling you back to tell you no. The other 32 you'll never hear from, and you're not sure why. Not something you did, because, but you'll just never hear from them at all, even though they on their website, contract manufacturing does blah blah blah, because they've got so many things coming in and so much business going on, they don't have time to respond. So that is the reality that we live in. So I would say dozens of groups at a time.
Great. Well, we're right at time. So thank you so much, everyone, for the questions. Thank you, Jamie, so much for the presentation. This was super valuable. We will, like I said, we've recorded this. So if you want to rewatch this, we will have it on our Startup CPG Vimeo channel. We'll share that in the Slack. We'll also have the slides available as well if you want to review any of the information Jamie shared. And then if you have any questions, as I mentioned at the beginning, Jamie's very active in our Slack. So that's a great place to find him. And we've got contact info here, but really appreciate everyone joining today. And yeah, thank you so much, Jamie. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, of course. Anytime.
And I will, if you aren't in Slack, I'm going to drop the link to join the Slack in there right now. I saw that we had that question.
Yep. CPG, go to that link there. That will get you in.
Here, I will drop it right here. There's the link to join. But yeah, as Jamie said, you can always go to startupcpg.com and find the latest link. Great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.